The Speckled Band, a Sherlock Holmes story. B1 level. A frightened visitor. Helen Stoner was afraid. She sat across from Sherlock Holmes in his Baker Street flat, her face pale, her hands shaking. "Mr. Holmes," she said quietly, "I think my life is in danger." Holmes leaned forward. "Tell me everything. Leave nothing out." Helen took a deep breath and began. The death of Julia. 2 years ago, her sister Julia had died in their family home, Stoke Moran, a dark old manor in the countryside. Julia was engaged, and she was happy. But one night, Helen heard a terrible scream from Julia's bedroom. She ran into the hallway. Julia's door opened slowly, and she stumbled out. Her face was white. Her eyes were full of fear. "Helen," she whispered. "The speckled band, the speckled band." Then she fell to the floor and died. The doctor said it was shock, or perhaps fear. But there were no visible marks on her body. No one had entered her room. The windows were locked from the inside. It was a mystery. There was one more thing. Their mother had left a large sum of money when she died. The money was controlled by their stepfather, Dr. Grimesby Roylott. But when each daughter married, she would receive her share of the inheritance. Strange nights. Now strange things had begun to happen. Dr. Roylott had moved Helen into Julia's old bedroom. At night, Helen could hear a low whistle, soft and strange. She also smelled something unpleasant in the air. She felt afraid, though she could not explain why. Dr. Roylott was a frightening man. He was tall and powerful, with a hard face and cold eyes. He had lived in India for many years, and he kept exotic animals on the grounds, including a cheetah and a baboon. The local people were terrified of him. Even Holmes knew his name. "He is a dangerous man," Holmes told Watson quietly after Helen left. "We must act quickly." A dangerous warning. That afternoon, something unexpected happened. Dr. Roylott himself arrived at Baker Street. He pushed the door open and walked in without knocking. He stood over Holmes like a shadow. "Stay away from my business," he said. His voice was cold and threatening. "I know you spoke to my stepdaughter. If you interfere, you will regret it." He picked up the iron poker from beside the fireplace and bent it with his bare hands. Then he threw it down and left. Holmes smiled calmly. He picked up the poker and straightened it again. "He is a strong man," said Holmes. "We shall see." The locked room. That evening, Holmes and Watson traveled to Stoke Moran. Helen had arranged for them to enter secretly while Dr. Roylott was away. Holmes examined both bedrooms carefully. He noticed several strange things. First, the bed in Julia's room was fixed to the floor. It could not be moved. Second, there was a bell rope hanging beside the bed, but it was not connected to any bell. Third, the ventilator, a small opening in the wall, did not lead outside. It led into Dr. Roylott's room next door. Holmes said nothing yet, but his eyes were bright. He and Watson hid in the dark room and waited. The speckled band. Hours passed. Then, in the deep silence of the night, Holmes suddenly sat up straight. He struck a match. He hit the bell rope hard with his walking stick. Again and again. A terrible cry came from the next room. They ran to Dr. Roylott's door and pushed it open. The doctor was sitting in his chair. He was not moving. Around his head was a strange band, a snake, long and pale, with a speckled pattern on its skin. A swamp adder, one of the most deadly snakes in India. Dr. Roylott had trained it to travel through the ventilator, down the bell rope, and onto the bed, to bite whoever was sleeping there. That was how Julia had died. That was the speckled band she had spoken about with her last breath. But Holmes had struck the snake with his stick. Frightened and angry, it had returned through the ventilator and bitten its own master. The ride home. Later, Holmes spoke quietly to Watson as they rode back to London. "I am not sure I feel sorry for the man," he said. "He caused his own end, but I do feel responsible. I struck the snake, and it turned on him. Still, Helen is safe. That is what matters." Watson nodded and said nothing. Outside, the countryside was dark and still, but somewhere behind them, a young woman could finally sleep without fear. The end.